Okay, teammates. So you are going to see two examples of evaluating an expression, a division expression, by drawing and labeling a tape diagram. So looking at this first example, it says evaluate the expression 9/12 divided by 3/12. So the first thing I ask myself when I look at a fraction problem, I'm going to ask myself, do they have common denominators? Because remember, if they do not have common denominators when I am drawing a tape diagram, I need to make sure that they do. However, with this case, I have 9/12 divided by 3/12, so they have the common denominator of 12. So now I'm going to do my first step, thinking back to key point 3. I'm going to draw my rectangle, which represents the whole. Okay, so the whole thing that I'm talking about. My second step is I'm going to cut the tape diagram, so my whole rectangle, into the amount of boxes of my denominator. So if I am going to divide this into 12 boxes, I'm going to draw 11 lines. And I'm going to add another box because I ran out of room. Just kidding. Okay, so teammates, this is why we check our works. Ms. Bryce then had to add another box. So make sure that you have 12 boxes representing that denominator of your two fractions. Now my second step is to separate the rectangle into smaller sections based on the number or the numerator of my dividend. So remember, my dividend is the number that I'm starting off with, and then my divisor is what I'm using to split it up. So I need to represent 9/12 on this tape diagram. So I'm going to shade 9 boxes. So I'm going to shade the amount of the numerator of my dividend. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, so I'm also going to label this. So this is 9/12. Now my next step tells me that I need to represent the numerator of my divisor. Okay, so my divisor is 3/12. So essentially this is asking how many groups of 3/12 are in 9/12. So if this entire rectangle represents the whole thing, meaning 12 pieces, 12 out of 12 would give me my one whole. I know that every single box represents 1/12. So now I need to label groups of 3/12. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3 boxes. So this represents a group of 3/12. 1, 2, 3. This is another group of 3/12. And 1, 2, 3. This represents a group of 3/12. So when I look at this division problem, it is asking me how many groups of 3/12 are in 9/12. And I see here that there is 1, 2, 3 groups. So my quotient is 3. All right, looking at this second example, it says evaluate the expression 12/8 divided by 3/4. So remember, the first thing I'm going to ask myself if I'm going to draw a tape diagram to represent a divisional fraction problem, do they have the same denominator? In this case, No, they do not. So I need to find a common denominator. So I need to find the least common multiple of these two denominators. I know that both numbers are multiples of 8. So I asked myself, how do I get from one denominator to the new denominator? If I am going from 12/8 to something out of 8, that means I'm staying the same. 8 divided by 8 is 1. So 12 times 1 is 12. If I'm going from 3/4 to a fraction out of 8ths, 4 times 2 gives me 8. So then 3 times 2 gives me 6. So 3/4 is equivalent to 6/8. So now the division problem I'm looking at is 12/8 divided by 6/8. So now that I have common denominators, I'm going to draw my whole. So one thing I noticed before I'm going to cut this into the amount of pieces of the denominator, I notice that my numerator is larger than my denominator. So it is a fraction greater than 1. I know this because it has a larger numerator than the denominator. So I need to make sure that I have enough room to shade my numerator of 12. So that means I'm going to want to have 2 whole numbers. And since I want to make sure that I have more than enough boxes to represent 12/8, I'm going to make sure that I have 2 wholes made up of 8s. So I'm going to cut this in half, and I'm going to draw 7 lines. And same on the second half. Okay, so now I have 16 boxes. I want to represent my dividend first. So I look to the numerator of my dividend, which is 12. I'm going to represent that by shading that amount of boxes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'm going to label this as 12/8. And then my expression is asking how many 6/8 fit into 12/8. So I need to label groups of 6/8. So I know that one box in this tape diagram represents 1/8. So I'm going to count 6 boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that is a group of 6/8. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's a group of 6/8. So how many groups of 6/8 fits into 12/8? 2 whole groups. So my quotient is 2. I can double check because if 2 fractions have the same denominator, I can divide their numerators to get my quotient. So 12 divided by 6 is 2, which matches the quotient I already got.